Continuous, continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way. William Wordsworth, he has given us a very beautiful description of his experience, whatever he got. And when he saw the dancing daffodils, what he felt means at that moment how much happiness he felt. So, in the second stanza of this poem, The Daffodils, we find that William Wordsworth is going to give us the description in detail of the description of the dancing daffodils. And that was the sight of the dancing daffodils that was making Wordsworth very happy, very joyful. So now what he says, continuous as the stars that shine, because they were a lot of in numbers, and they were continuous. Okay, means the daffodils are being compared here as the stars. In the very first stanza, William Wordsworth, he compared himself with a cloud, and now in the second stanza, there is being a comparison of the daffodils with the stars. Okay, the stars that always shine in the sky and twinkle on the Milky Way. Okay, Milky Way, that is the galaxy. So now what he says, that the daffodils continuously they were shining, they were twinkling, and because they were fluttering and dancing, and they were spread far and wide. Okay, because they were large in number, they stretched in never ending line, and because the daffodils they were spread far and wide as stars shine, right, as stars shine and move rapidly on the Milky Way, move rapidly in their way on the galaxy. Similarly, the daffodils were also spread everywhere, never ending line. Okay, they were spread everywhere, and that line was never ending line along the margin of a bay, along the margin of a bay, the margin of the lake, right, the margin of the lake, that is the border of a lake, of that particular lake where he had seen them. So here is presented, that margin of the lake is presented here just like a Milky Way, in which the stars of daffodils are shining, because they are tossing their heads, and that is the reason that they are looking just like stars. So the stars of daffodils, they are shining, and Wordsworth reminds us that the daffodils stretched in an endless row. Okay, endless row on the shore of the lake, and because they were large in a number, so he couldn't count 10,000, saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. 10,000 saw I at a glance. Now they were in a large number, and this was the reason that William Wordsworth, he couldn't count how many he saw. How many he saw. This is the reason that he is using this phrase 10,000 saw. So, but he guesses that he saw 10,000 daffodils, and because that is a very large number, so these daffodils were tossing their heads in sprightly dance, means they were tossing their heads in a lively dance. So in the second stanza, what we find that the image of the stars twinkling on the Milky Way, and this image is very beautiful. Okay, twinkle on the Milky Way, this image is very beautiful image, and Wordsworth also uses this line 10,000 saw I at a glance. And why he is using these words 10,000? To show that they were innumerable. So this line I at a glance, this line is an example, beautiful example of hyperbole. So we find here simile, and we also find here hyperbole, figure of speech, and this second stanza is again presenting the poetic talent of William Wordsworth. Then come to the third stanza of this poem, and here we find the waves the waves beside them danced. Okay, not only the daffodils were dancing, but with them, along with them, the waves were also dancing. The waves beside them danced. Actually, it seemed to the poet that the waves of the lake, okay, the waves of what? The waves of the lake, that particular lake, and they were also dancing in happiness. Not only the flowers were happy, but even the waves of the lake were also very happy, and this was the reason that they were also dancing with the daffodils. The waves beside them danced, but they hear the daffodils, okay, the golden daffodils, a host of golden daffodils, but they outdid it. It seemed to the poet as if there was going a competition between the waves of the lake and between, that is, the golden daffodils, and they all were dancing, but in this competition, who won, who seemed to get victory? Not the waves, but the golden daffodils, because in their dance, in their happiness, the golden daffodils, they left behind whom? The waves, okay, but they outdid, that is, but the daffodils, their happiness, their joy, or their delight was greater than the delight of the waves of the lake. Means they surpassed the sparkling waves in their joy. Okay, sparkling waves in glee. In glee, that is joy, delight, rapture, or happiness. But the daffodils, now they left behind the sparkling waves. Sparkling, the waves, they were shining, and they were shining because they were very happy, it seemed to the poet. And now what was that scene was so beautiful that at that moment there was nothing to do for the poet. So a poet could not but be gay. When we find that there was a dance among all the phenomena of nature, nature was being so happy, and the waves were dancing, daffodils were dancing. So at that moment, what we find that a poet cannot do anything, only be happy. So now the company of the daffodils, okay, not the company only of the waves, but the company of those golden daffodils, that was being enjoyed by William Wordsworth a lot, and that at that moment he forgot that he was lonely, or there was no one with him, or he was so sad. Means after coming in the lap of nature, William Wordsworth, he forgets his all pain, his sorrows, his inner agony, and that is the reason that what he composes, whatever he composes, there we find a lot of happiness. So a poet could not but be gay. This means that William Wordsworth, there was nothing to do with him, so this was the reason that he was enjoying the beautiful company of those golden daffodils, and he was also just like them, he was also full of happiness. So this is the reason that this line is also very remarkable, very important line. A poet could not help being happy in such company. Okay, in which company? In the company of the flowers, the daffodils. In such a jocund company, in such a jocund, the same, that is a poet, what a poet can do, finding such a beautiful company, finding such a delightful company. So just like daffodils, just like waves, a poet can also be very happy finding such a beautiful company. So William Wordsworth was very happy with the company of nature, right? Most important lines. I gazed and gazed, but little thought. At that moment, there was no idea, no concept, there was nothing in my mind to be considered, because I simply couldn't remove my eyes from that beautiful scene of nature. Whatever was going on in front of my eyes, the beauty of nature, the happiness of daffodils. So at that moment I couldn't think of future, or what kind of wealth the show to me had brought. So these kinds of ideas were not going within me. At that moment I only and only liked to look at their beauty, to enjoy their happiness. I gazed and gazed. So William Wordsworth, he continued, okay, he continued to look at that beautiful scene of the golden daffodils and the scene of the waves of lake. And he didn't think what wealth the beautiful scene of golden daffodils, what wealth the show to me had brought. So he didn't think about the wealth, what kind of wealth? Wealth of happiness, wealth of joy, wealth of inner delight that was being given by that beautiful scene. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought, because at that time I was not thinking of the coming time. That beauty of daffodils that was giving me delight, but I was not thinking that the same beauty can even give me delight in future also, right? So here again we find sparkling waves, dancing daffodils. Here we find a pictorial quality of William Wordsworth, okay, because undirected, that is unconsciously we start to make an image, a picture in our mind that what was going there. So no doubt that this kind of joy giving influence of nature. So here within these two lines we find that this stanza or these two lines are showing very well that it depends on us what kind of delight we can have from nature. And if we go to nature with a receptive mind, so we can find a lot of delight. And another thing is that if you try to recollect William Wordsworth's definition of poetry, that poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling. So that kind of concept is also very clear here, because this stanza shows the relevance of that concept of William Wordsworth, right? Poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling. Here we find that definition. For oft when on my couch I lie, right? So at that moment, what wealth the show to me had brought, he couldn't think of that. But now for oft, now what happened with William Wordsworth? That he was at that moment he was no. For oft when on my couch I lie in vacant or in pensive mood. Okay, in pensive mood. So again we find here William Wordsworth, because he is describing the joy he felt at the memory of the golden daffodils. And in the last stanza of this poem, he says that whenever he lies, okay, for oft when on my couch I lie, whenever he lies on his couch, that is on his bed, in a free mood, in a thoughtful mood, okay, pensive mood, that is pensive, thoughtful mood, and in vacant, okay, in vacant, that is in free time, in free mood, in thoughtful mood, means whenever he finds himself lonely, we can say in brief, then what happens? They flash, they that is a host of golden daffodils, okay. And what happens with William Wordsworth at that moment whenever he finds himself completely lonely, or whenever he lies on his bed in a free mood, in a thoughtful mood, in a pensive mood? So now the daffodils seem to come in the, that is within inward eye, okay, they flash upon, they, that is golden daffodils. And now here actually we find a romantic characteristic, that is imagination, high imagination. Now here William Wordsworth, he recalls the beauty of the daffodils, okay, that is happening only because of his high imagination, because they flash upon that inward eye, and inward eye, that is the recollection. This kind of recollection gives him a great joy in his lonely life, in his solitary life. So here we find the high imagination of William Wordsworth, because he is able to recall the beauty of the daffodils. So here Wordsworth expresses the intensity of, his joy at the thought of daffodils. And in brief, we can say that whenever William Wordsworth is sad, melancholy, alone, and he's away from that kind of beautiful scene of nature, the daffodils, they come, they flash upon that inward eye. So now the daffodils, they give him a lot of pleasure, which is the bliss of solitude. And William Wordsworth, he thinks that it is a bliss. Actually, that kind of scene is a boon, and it is a bliss of solitude, because nature, or the beautiful scene of nature, can even solace you, can even give you happiness in your solitude, in your loneliness. And then my heart with pleasure fills. At that moment, I don't want the company of any human being, I don't want any kind of delight. Simply an incident of past, the beauty of past, can give me a lot of delight. So, and then my heart, it happened only because of the recollection, because of his high imagination, that the heart of William Wordsworth fills with pleasure, pleasure at the recollection of daffodils. And then my heart with pleasure fills, and dances with whom? With the daffodils. Okay, so now what happens with William Wordsworth, that whenever he tries to lie on his bed and he feels himself very sad or melancholic, at that moment the daffodils, they themselves come and inward eye, and what happens with him, that his heart gets full of pleasure, and his heart also means inner part of his body, or we can say just like my heart, it is just like soul. Okay, inward eye, that is soul, and his soul also starts to dance with the daffodils, with the golden daffodils. So William Wordsworth, he begins to dance like them. So here we find, okay, throughout this poem, that the daffodils are to Wordsworth a source of happiness, a source of delight or joy, even in solitary moments of life also. So another line of his definition, poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling. In the last stanza, we find here the second line of his definition of poetry: emotions recollected. Okay, they flash upon emotions recollected in tranquility. And William Wordsworth saw a scene, and 2 years later he composed this poem recollecting the actual incident or scene. And beside this, we can say that no doubt this poem is also giving us an idea that how much Wordsworth loved nature, or he was a priest of nature, a worshipper of nature, or a poet of nature. So memory or recollection helps William Wordsworth to have a mental picture of a scene that can be felt, that can be seen through senses. So this was the reason that this poem is very melodious and it touches our heart. There is a lot of poetic talent presented throughout the poem of William Wordsworth, and we come to know that no doubt he was a romantic poet. And then my heart with pleasure fills, and dances with the daffodils.